As Pokemon could literally have a big shit in the middle of the road and put Pikachu's face on it, and I would buy it.
Yeah, I saw a YouTube video and I did think, oh, I'd like this to be an episode at one point. It was about recently a grading company has fucked a card up and took it from a PSA 10 to a PSA 6 and are then
Oh.
lowballing the guy. And it was a card that there was only 50 of them in the world. It was a Deoxys or something.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, like three different forms. And they said, oh, we'll pay you 20 grand for it based on fair market value. And the last version of this card that was sold was by this company for 45 grand. And I was
Yeah,
just,
pieces of shit PSA. Unfortunately, they've got the market pretty much cornered. There are a few grading companies, but when it comes to your casual collectors specifically, they will always buy PSA. Even though you get your CGC can do a pristine 10, which are like the holy grail of grading perfect cards, and they are better. But for some reason, just the way the market is working, they're not liquid enough.
yeah, and it's horrible that and I'd love to do and again I'd love to do this in an episode one day that but it just seems like for the average consumer, they bend you over a barrel and they fuck you until your ass is red raw like a red rose. Welcome back to Think Tankards.
Wow.
Hello
Wow,
everyone.
that
That
was
is
interesting.
That is today's episode. We're going to talk about the War of the Roses. And if this is the first time you're joining us, hello, welcome, come on in. It's just three white guys. Nothing bad's ever happened when you've met with three white guys.
No.
We are three nerds who are based in the northeast of England. We are three people who met doing stand-up comedy, and every week, through a topic one of us chooses, we will subject the other two to learning about it. My name is Chris.
My name is Ian.
And my name is Nathan.
And together, this is the Think Tankards podcast. Now, if you are following along the podcast, and a lot of people do this, despite the fact that no podcast generally has a serialized release, like you don't have to listen to one after the other, everybody seems to start at the beginning and say, I'll catch up, rather than just picking a topic and diving in. But so if you are one of those weird little fuckers, you might have heard our Scams podcast episode, which was our first one. And this is the second where we're going to discuss the War of the Roses, which is... Oh, Ian, I meant to tell you this. We are going to stay at Warwick Castle in June, me and my
Oh,
family.
very nice.
So Merton did that year pass thing, and that was like the closest we could do. So
Sure.
we get to see this all take place during a jousting match. But I'm going to shut up for a bit, and I think without further ado, Ian, I'll hand over to you, and I'll sit with my legs crossed on the floor, my fingers on my lips like primary school.
Sure thing, sure thing. Gather round, children. So the Wars of the Roses, I've decided to use this as my first topic on the basis that I am a qualified historian, by which I mean I went to university and did a history degree. There is a difference between qualified in something and practicing in it. So I am a qualified historian, not a practicing historian. I don't do it as part of my day job. In the same way that I'm neither a practicing Catholic or a practicing homosexual. So there we go. So with
You
regard,
qualified homosexual
You know,
though.
yeah, I was thinking, is it like, is there people out there right now who are like, shit, I've just been, there's ranked pro and I'm just an amateur?
I mean, I don't know what
Yeah.
universities are offering up nowadays, but
I think that's where casual gay sex comes in, if there's ranked gay sex.
I mean, my sister went to the University of Brighton, so I could ask.
Yeah.
But yeah, either way. So yes, so the Wars of the Roses is something that particularly appealed to me. I'm a particular fan of medieval history. I did my dissertation on one of the battles that's going to come up later on, and that does kind of smack on the fact that I am from Leicester. Leicester is where the Battle of Bosworth famously took place, or Leicestershire, moreover. Leicester itself, more recently, was famous for having found the remains of Richard III and digging them up and putting them back in the ground. And Leicester's basically built its tourist industry of the last 15 years around it. Good on the hometown. But Before we go into the specific subject matter, to you, gentlemen, I was just wondering what your own respective kind of paths with regards to history are, insofar as, how long did you study it for? What do you remember covering when you did study history? Did you enjoy it? How soon did you give it up? And has anything about pursuing history appeal to you as adults? So perhaps starting with Chris.
Oh, yeah, right. So coming straight off the top, I am ridiculously more adept at fictional history than I am real world history. But because of the love I have for Tolkien, that for me has been a bit of a gateway to Beowulf
Okay.
and Chaucer, as well as we saw, like you saw a glimpse of it with the last episode, my love for philology and languages and the history of languages. So is something I very much enjoy. However, overall, we're quite a history household. My wife is obsessed with ancient Egypt to the point where she actually had an affair with an Egyptian man. No, she did. She went. She went. I sent her and her dad on a Nile cruise last year, and they did all of the they did like the pyramids, they did all of the ancient sites, and we're bringing our daughter up in very much the same way. So we visit a lot of castles. So we imbibe a lot of history. Um, at school, I did study history at GCSE, and I loved it actually. I did the Bloody Code and Jack the Ripper. Those were my two areas. But I'm much more of a hobbyist historian nowadays, very much around. So I write a little bit. I write stories and stuff on the side, and one of the things I love to write about is fictionalized versions of Northeast England. And to do that, I do a lot of research around. For example, I've chosen a period in the Elizabethan times where I've set a story, and I've researched like basically balls deep on what it'd be like to live in the Northeast in and around the year 1597 during a famine. So
Right.
my yeah, nothing formal. And the biggest demonstration of history for me is through language and through studying Tolkien. But other than that, yeah, I'd like to think I'm pretty much I'm very much interested in lots of different histories, but I always skew more towards the mythology side of things as well,
Right. Yeah.
like the mystical kind of stuff. So, for example, I know far more Norse myths than I would know actual like dates and battles in England.
Okay.
To give an
Fair enough.
example. Sorry, that was quite a long answer. I do
No,
apologize.
that's fine. That's fine. Nathan.
My answer's going to be significantly shorter. I know I don't really know much about history going before things started to explode. I've got quite a short attention span. I did history in high school, obviously, and then to the point of where I could choose not to do it, I chose not to do it. It doesn't necessarily not interest me. I am interested in it. I'm more interested in like World War One, World War Two, and like military history and things like that. In preparation for today, I watched The War of the Roses, the 1989 dark comedy directed by Danny DeVito, starring Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner. So I'm quite interested to see how that's got anything to do with this whatsoever. I was watching it thinking, this is strange. This has nothing to do with history whatsoever. It's about a divorce. But we'll we'll see if there are any similarities.
That does kind of answer what my next question was going to be, is what do you specifically know about the War of the Roses, or Wars of the Roses?
Well, I know that after 17 years of marriage, Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner descend into a vicious, no-holds-barred war over their house and possessions, with Danny DeVito playing a lawyer caught in the middle. Hilarity ensues.
And remade last year with Olivia Colman and Benedict Cumberbatch.
Was it really? What was it called?
Just the Roses, I believe.
Bastard, I've missed that one out. I could have... Right. I'll watch that
I
after.
appreciate the historical research of the 80s.
I think my experience is a bit more authentic than Nathan's because I've lived this. So when I went to Warwick Castle last summer, when I went to watch the F1, I stayed at the Warwick Castle the night before because I got work paid for me to go to the F1 as like an event, and yeah, my most exciting part was getting to stay at Warwick Castle, and I stayed in a tent the night before. It was amazing. So I know that a lot of it involves really fit women jousting, then doing tricks on the horses at the end, where like they'll lean out of the saddle and like run their hands along the ground while their
Hmm.
ass is stuck up and they got a leg straight up in the air. I did, funnily enough, I did kind of, I got a little bit teary during this because it seemed like a really intense historic time. So I was weeping, I was a little bit chubbed up, erect, and I was really impressed at like the horsemanship on display. So I feel like that all those three things give me a really good grasp of what we're going to talk about today.
I think so. I think so, yes. So, without humouring you any further. So, the Wars of the Roses. They were basically a set of civil wars that went throughout English history. And you might be thinking, hang on, isn't the English Civil War where Charles I got his head cut off? You'd be
That's exactly what I
correct.
was thinking.
You'd be correct, but that happens to be the sixth of 7 sets of civil wars that happened through English history since the Norman conquest of 1066. Very quickly, there was the anarchy in the 12th century between Stephen I and Matilda. There was 2 lots of the Barons' Wars, which go around the Magna Carta, with Prince John of Robin Hood fame, later King John. And there was the Dispenser War, which happened in the 14th century, which was again to do with various types of curbs of barons trying to get at the king. And the Wars of the Roses was the 5th lot of civil wars, English Civil War the 6th, and then the final one, the Johnny Come Lately, was the Jacobite rebellions, where people loyal to James II were trying to overthrow what became the House of Hanover. Very dry, very boring, glad to get it out the way. So, the Wars of the Roses really started with Edward III, who had 5 sons. By the time of his reign, we're talking 1327 through 1377. He was one of the longest reigning kings ever, 50 years, and he had 5 sons. At the time of his reign, he was the representing the House of Plantagenet, and of his 5 sons, he all 5 of them got given their own houses. His eldest born, Edward the Black Prince, had the Duchy of Cornwall. His next oldest son, Lionel, had the Duchy of Clarence, which Clarence, not actually a place in and of itself in Britain. It refers to the market town of Clare in Suffolk, as opposed to an actual city. After that was John of Gaunt, who inherited the House of Lancaster, and then Edmund of Langley had the Duchy of York, and then finally the youngest brother, Thomas of Woodstock, had the Duchy of Gloucester. Now, of those 5 places, gentlemen, where is your favourite place in Britain? Cornwall, Clare
Oh,
in Suffolk, Lancaster, York, or Gloucester?
it's got to be York for me. It's got that strong Viking connection to Jorvik, and I love walking the walls.
Uh-huh.
But is it Gloucester that's is it Gloucester? That's meant to be that is rumored to be a representation of the city of Troy. Is it Gloucester, or am I thinking of another city?
That's the first time I've heard of it, certainly.
Oh, there's some city where like there's walls, or like there's like 7 walls and ruins outside of the city that's meant to be like in mythology of the founding of Britain, that
Right.
it's meant to be a representation of like the 7 walls of Troy, which also Tolkien took inspiration of for the hidden city of Gondolin with its in Minas Tirith with its 7 walls as well. I'll look that up, but no,
Yeah,
York is
go for it.
definitely my favorite. Yeah, York is 100% my favorite.
Okay, so you
I
might
do
have a
like York.
side. Yeah.
Yeah, I like York. But it's very busy. I'm actually born in Suffolk, I
Oh, okay.
believe. I'm not very good at geography, but I was born around Bury St Edmunds way. Is that Suffolk?
It is, yep.
Yep. Okay, great. That's a fact. That's a fact for you there. So I'm going to take I'm going to take that side
You're going to go with
through.
Clarence.
Yeah, I'm going to go with my friend Clarence.
Good stuff. So with regards to the last thing about the Wars of the Roses before we kind of like dive into the kings, because again, a lot of the history of the age is based around the kings and nobles and such. Like social history only really emerges when you get such things as the development of the printing press and ideas of basic chronicles of English being put into the English language and therefore being more representative of what happens. Because a lot of what we're talking about really doesn't concern the majority of the people of the country. It's really just all one massive power play. And if you are involved, it's because you're being whipped up into an army to serve someone as part of the great medieval feudal system that is the social strata of the Middle Ages, because you had basically the king at the top and then the barons underneath, and then they'd be served by the knights, and then the knights would have lands which were worked upon by peasants. And that is pretty much medieval times. And there was only a kind of big shift in power structure with the Black Death, which meant that there were so few people out there that it forced nobles to really kind of up their treatment of the underclass so as to get any work done whatsoever. The Wars of the Roses, it's technically between 1455 and 1487, a period of 32 years, but in actuality, if you talk about actual warring, we're talking about 2 years and a month in terms of
What?
actual fighting. It wasn't one long continuous period of fighting. It was a case of there'd be a skirmish and then people would batten down and, really there were only 2 prolonged periods of fighting, the longest of which was 19 months between September 1459 and March 1461, and then a couple of months in 1471. Everything else was basically the build-up to a major battle and a battle, and that was about
So
it.
yeah, so a lot of filler episodes.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna go. I was
lots.
gonna go with like, so we've got a really long history and tradition of edging.
Yeah, it's basically like Dragon Ball Z. We've got like 30
Oh,
episodes of
yeah,
just two people standing in a field having monologues.
yeah.
Pretty
This
much.
planet will explode in 5 minutes. 2 years later. So, Ian, as a qualified but not practicing historian,
Mm.
may I draw your attention? There is a meme where it is, and it seems like it might be applicable here, where it's like in European history, the Battle of Northampton, 2 people die, written about in history books for the rest of time. The Great Leap Forward in China, 2 sentences, 30 million people die.
Yes.
Is that very much kind of
I
accurate? Like,
It's really the case that a lot of wars are mislabeled famously, and what kind of crosses over only insofar as the build-ups and origins of the Wars of the Roses cross over. But before the Wars of the Roses, you had the 100 Years' War, which famously lasted between 1337 and 1453, which, for all you maths fans, is 116 years. But again, it wasn't 116 years of continuous fighting. It was 116 years where England and France were at war saying, that bit of France belongs to me. No, it does not. Yeah, it does. And then, basically there are peace treaties, some of which last for a matter of months, some of which last for over a decade. But ultimately, as is their wont, England and France will always be at war. It's just the way it is. That is what history tells us. So with regards to massive loss of life. There's certainly one battle that I'm going to talk about right at the beginning. And again, technically, it's kind of more of a precursor to the wars than it is actually part of them, although it's a very obvious flashpoint in which 160 people die out of maybe 9,000 people. And in that particular battle, it was more just a case of, we want that guy dead, give him to us. And he tries to save himself by holding himself up in a pub, but that doesn't work because I don't know if you've seen Shaun of the Dead, but not all of those
Yeah.
people live.
No, so he went and waited for it all to blow over.
Basically, yeah. So this would be the Duke of Somerset, and that will play in directly to things kicking off 1455. Now, with regards to the prelude to that, I do have to talk about the two main houses, which are the houses of Lancaster and the House of York. I know I asked you guys the question. I'm slightly conflicted insofar as the Wilson line of primogeniture, at which I'm not keeping my end of the bargain up after I have to rely on my brother and his loins. But the Wilson line is basically Yorkshireman throughout. So theoretically, I should feel some kind of degree of fealty to Yorkshire, but I've never lived in Yorkshire, and I went to university in Lancaster. Quite frankly, I've got mixed feelings. I like York as a city. I hated the university. What with what with my university leanings, but the two universities did have an intervarsity rivalry, which was called Roses, where the sports teams on either side would compete over the course of a weekend. And I went over to York twice during my university time with my student radio station just to cover the events, and because it was just an excuse for a weekend away.
We had such different university experience. By the way, for anyone who hasn't read Pride and Prejudice, primogeniture is the act of the oldest male heir being, the oldest male relative being the heir. That's
Sure.
for that one, right? But
Wow.
you had an intervarsity rivalry,
Yep.
and you had a strong sense of university identity. Do you know what my university had?
I don't know where you went.
Drugs. I went to fucking Leeds Met. It's now Leeds Beckett, named after
Oh, man.
Thomas Becket, the 12th century archbishop who was murdered in his church after a dispute with the king, I think.
Yeah.
I thought it was named after Rob Beckett.
Yeah, there's a big pair of white teeth on the front of the building.
Yeah.
It's,
Rob Beckett, Britain's proudest Yorkshireman.
yeah, you had all these. I had drugs and cheap chicken burgers.
Oh,
Okay,
man,
now.
I had that and I didn't even go to university.
Yeah, exactly. Like, my God.
You missed out on the student loan then. Well played.
Damn.
Oh, yeah, true. I was the last year to get the previous prices before they were hiked, which
Yeah, it's.
feels good, man.
Oh, I think I was because I'm older than you, so I think my siblings were part of your year. It's like so. I avoided the hike that they had, and so.
So,
And
well,
yes,
so
yeah.
I didn't have the hike. I had the 3,000 a year. That's my. I was the last year to have that.
Sure, because I had 1,000 a year. So
Oh.
What?
Were you when it was much harder to go into uni, but it was a lot cheaper?
yes.
Oh, what? God damn, you age well. Fuck me. Jesus Christ, Ian.
Thank you. Thank
That
you,
is
Karen.
what I thought when I did the comedy bio for our Facebook page, and I asked him his age. He said he was 40. I was like, fuck off. Like, what the fuck? No way.
I missed 2 of the last 3 weeks of our comedy training because I was celebrating my 40th birthday.
Goodness me.
You were
Yeah.
away in a Bacta tank being rejuvenated.
Oh yes, that is what Croatia does. Full of Bacta tanks. Right. So as to the matter at hand, so at the start of things, before Edward III came about, there wasn't a House of York, there wasn't a House of Lancaster. Ostensibly, what happened was primogeniture, as thankfully elaborated upon by Chris, heir to the throne was going to be Edward the Black Prince, because he was the oldest son.
That's
Now,
war.
now, I did look into why he might have been called the Black Prince, just in case. Not necessarily Nathan was going to say something, but in case it came up. The Black Prince is believed to either be a reference to him having had a black shield, although there isn't actually any evidence to bear that out, or more likely because he was very brutal towards the French. So the Black Prince was basically a really famed, prestigious kind of general. So he was a knight. I mean, obviously he was the Prince of the Realm, but he was a trusted commander in the 100 Years' War. I mean, the kind of reputation that Henry V has for doing something similar about 50 years later, that is basically the template that the Black Prince founded. Just really successful, won a ton of French land when he was out over there. However, one thing that he also, quote unquote, won in France was dysentery, because hey, talk about innate diseases. Thank you very much, France.
What a shit prize.
So he returns to England around the time that Edward III is starting to become gravely ill. He died actually just about a year before his father did. Now, in terms of primogeniture, it is meant to go firstborn son, firstborn son, firstborn son. Now, the Black Prince did have sons. His eldest, Edward, actually died before him of bubonic plague, because 'twas the season / time period. And therefore, because of primogeniture, the throne passed to his next eldest son, Richard, after Edward III died a year later, and he was 10 years old at the time. Now, 10-year-old children, gentlemen, would you trust them ruling a country?
No, I have a 10-year-old child, and every single day she puts her trousers on the wrong way round, no matter what. No matter what. And I don't even trust her with the Switch 2 upstairs.
Right. Okay.
The academic answer is no, that's absurd. But then I also think I look at our leaders now, and I look at them across the world, and I think we might as well. Let's see what happens. Let's fucking see what happens, because
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, because it couldn't go any worse.
yeah, we might as well. Fuck it, yeah. All right, bring it back. Let's see what happens. Tutankhamun was like 10 as well. Let's see what happens.
There are like iPad kids these days, so it would be a lot different. It would be like we'd have national holidays so we could all play Roblox.
Or like, can you imagine that instead of wars and bombing oil, like bombing because of oil and stuff, like they settle it on like fucking TikTok Live, they have a duet and they just argue
Yeah.
it out. I mean, we could try that.
Or maybe if it was like back during my childhood, we could get people on the hit TV show Get Your Own Back. Imagine Netanyahu being gunged
Yeah.
because of the atrocities that have happened.
I mean, anything that gets Dave Benson Phillips work, I'm all for.
I am all for Dave Benson Phillips becoming relevant once more.
Yeah.
But the real answer, not the real answer, the serious answer, of course, is it's always who's appointed their like regent or protector or whatever, because that's where the power lies, right? And
Yeah.
I think I might be wrong here, but based on several Goosebumps episodes, I don't think it generally goes well for the kids when the people who are their regents get a taste for that power.
God, all the mid-90s references here. Goosebumps, get your own back. Lovely stuff.
Yeah.
So, yes, I mean, in short, the answer is a regent. So Richard II had his uncle. So the first two sons of Edward III had now died. So John of Gaunt, who was the originator of the House of Lancaster, was put in charge. Gaunt is probably, I don't want to get political, but he's probably a kind of Keir Starmer analogue insofar as very unpopular, and just concerns his time with the running of government and such like. Gaunt, actually, though, you mentioned earlier, Chris, Chaucer. Gaunt was the patron of Geoffrey Chaucer, who, for you literary buffs, wrote the smash hit epic The Canterbury Tales. And The Black Prince was indeed a a cameo role in the 2001 movie A Knight's Tale, in which Geoffrey Chaucer was also a supporting character.
That is a great film.
Excellent film. Obviously not in the slightest bit historically accurate, but who
What?
gives a shit?
You don't know. You weren't there.
Yeah, sure, the Nike swoosh in the armour, very of its time. Great film, though. And then, so the problem that happened was that Richard ultimately came of age and thought, like, the best thing to do is distance himself from his uncle. Not a terrible idea politically, but it turns out that he had no experience of doing any kind of government running and therefore relied upon what's known as the royal prerogative, where, you know, ultimately royal people are appointed by God, therefore that much better than you, and relied upon favourite courtiers to help run the government. The problem is that doesn't actually work, and the country was basically fucked to the point of you had the Peasants' Revolt of 1381, and he had to essentially kind of invite Gaunt back into the government to try and get things done, and this means that a lot of his favourites get imprisoned or banished or what have you. But it turns out Richard was a kind of patient, bitter person, so waited 8 years before taking his vengeance against the people who'd brought down his favourites, which included Gaunt's oldest living heir, Henry Bolingbroke, who was exiled to France in 1397. Now, after Gaunt dies in 1399, in between that, by the way, is the 1398 Revenge Parliament, because Richard II was not very good at branding. John of Gaunt dies in 9, and whilst Bolingbroke should technically inherit his lands, Richard chooses to exile Bolingbroke on a permanent basis and take the lands for himself.
Can I just ask,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt, but was it
I go.
actually called the Revenge Parliament?
It was not by Henry. It's something that
Right.
has gone down in law as the Revenge. It's like the popular kind of colloquialism as to how do we mark this Parliament out from all the other ones?
Right. I guess that's what Reform really wanted to call their political party. But
Yeah.
it's just a bit strong, isn't it?
I mean, at the time of, earlier in his reign, there was the Good Parliament of 1376, followed
Well.
by the Bad Parliament of 1377. So it's kind of like, for you Twin Peaks fans, the White Lodge versus the Black Lodge.
Yes. See, this is what happens when you put 10-year-olds in charge. You get names like this.
Yeah. Oh, that was the nasty Parliament. Yeah.
The Poopy Poo Head Parliament.
So Bolingbroke was understandably unhappy and therefore decided to land at a place called Ravenspurn in Yorkshire. Any idea where that is, Nathan?
In Yorkshire.
Well done.
Just next to Hull.
Is it? Okay. I'll take your word for it. I just asked in case you knew.
No.
And he arrived in just saying, Oh, I just want to reclaim my inheritance, basically. But because he was far more popular than Richard was, he started marching throughout the country, gaining forces. Richard at the time was actually on tour in Ireland, probably watching the rugby, but came back and saw the writing on the wall and just surrendered to Bolingbroke, saying, "Look, I'll abdicate from the throne if you just spare me my life." So without any battles whatsoever, Bolingbroke becomes Henry IV, the first Lancastrian king, although, again, crucially, it's still all the House of Plantagenet, technically. The House of Lancaster versus the House of York is, again, one of those colloquialisms like these parliaments. It's like there is a dynastic line, but that isn't necessary. It's more kind of shorthand for kind of unofficial warring factions.
Oh.
So there was a very short-lived failed rebellion in January 1400 by men loyal to Richard II, who was in captivity at Pontefract Castle. And as soon as that was put down, Henry IV thought, he's got to go. And he ultimately died in the castle in February that year, so 1 month later, seemingly via starvation. It isn't necessarily known how he came to starve. You can probably guess it was of Henry's doing. That being said, it's the kind of thing that we've got no way of proving. That being said, like the Epstein files, it hung over the entire rule of the man in charge going forward.
Oh.
So what war did he start to distract from these accusations then?
Well,
It's-
he didn't get the chance, really, because he spent the majority of his reign. So he came to the throne the tail end of 1399. He was on the throne up until 1413. So, 13 years, give or take a few additional months. He spent most of the time putting down rebellions. Now, these weren't technically wars as such, insofar as they wouldn't be thought of as being part of the Wars of the Roses. The most famous of the rebellions is the Welsh uprising by Welsh Robert the Bruce knockoff or William Wallace knockoff Owen Glendower.
Oh.
I don't know if there are any Welsh people who'd like to correct my pronunciation there, but frankly, I'm just coming off having half my face paralysed, so I really don't care. If anything, it probably helps.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
your
if it's
Welsh is
yeah.
probably better than it's ever been.
Oh, but there we go.
Yeah, it was,
So the
luckily it was the side that does the vowels that was paralysed, so I'm fluent in Welsh now.
So the Welsh uprising was between 1400 and 1415, so that basically lasted through his entire reign. There was also the Battle of Shrewsbury between the King's forces and Lord Henry Hotspur Percy of Northumberland. So the Percy family kind of slightly immortalised in Blackadder. You've got Lord Percy in the first and second seasons.
Yes, right now we're talking.
And then also the Percy family, more known for ruling Northumbria for generation upon generation. I believe Alnwick Castle was theirs, amongst, probably many others. I mean, in your grading of castles, Chris, Alnwick versus Warwick.
That's such a cruel question, right? Because I specifically said when I was in Warwick, this is the most castle-y castle I've ever been in, and it is like it's massive, it's fucking big, and it's got a trebuchet. It's got that hall of the armory with all the weapons and the armor all everywhere. Like it's got those massive carved tables. It's got the room that was preserved when the Tudors stayed there,
Yep.
or when they let it go to shit for a bit. And it's huge. And plus, I saw jousting there. But Alnwick is beautiful. A little bit of Harry Potter was filmed there. It's majestic as shit, and it's got the poison gardens.
It does, yeah.
So, right. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to go with Warwick just because it's got it's also got the Dungeons tour in there as well.
It does, yes.
And I did that, and I did the no, this is bad because my daughter wasn't with me at the time, but I did the Julia Donaldson Zog maze, like I did Zog the dragon because I couldn't resist. I was like, I've got to go in for her, and they've got peacocks walking around.
Yeah,
like it's just got. They probably they might have had the peacocks, but they wouldn't have had Zog back then. They'd have had real dragons to fight, as we all know. So yeah, at Warwick Castle as well, just because as you're going in, you've got to pass over the big fucking ditch as well. And it was all, oh God, yeah. Okay, right.
So you're looking forward to going back, is what you're saying?
Yeah. I'm getting excited now that I'm talking about it because I also stayed in something called the King's Tent as well. And it was awesome. So yes, in terms of castles, Warwick beats Alnwick, I'm afraid, but I still haven't been to Chillingham Castle, and I've heard that's pretty good.
No, I haven't either. Although that's meant to be more kind of ghost specific, I believe.
Yes, and just as a very quick aside as well, going back to Ravenspurn, Ravenspur or Ravenspurn was actually at one point a rival to the port city of Hull. However, Hull won that one because Ravenspur no longer exists because it's been swallowed by the fucking sea.
Yeah.
It was built on clay. The entire town was built on clay hills, which the water just ate away at. And now it is out away at sea. It is no longer existent, and it is being drilled for gas. So that for anybody who's a cartographer of the northeast of England and wondering why Ravenspur wasn't on your map, it's that's why it's gone. Soz. But I just thought it was a nice little tidbit to add in.
I agree. And it also does let Nathan off the hook a bit, saying, Nathan, why don't you know anything about this place that no longer exists?
Because my great granddad fucking buried it. He was there every day with a shovel cutting it away.
Anything to do with Hull, I don't really know about because I spent a lot of my life in Grimsby, and we're just told you don't like these people, and that's all I know.
I was like that with the people of Derby, and then my parents then moved to Derby, so I had to lump it for 2 years. And after doing that, I came round a bit on Derby, and it just made me hate Nottingham more. Strangely,
have hatred will travel.
Yeah, absolutely. Why do you think I've set my roots down here for so long? So Henry had to dispel physical uprisings. He had the death of Richard II hanging over him, especially because he did basically take the throne, which, again, not unheard of back in medieval times, but to get people on side, it is very important to have an heir of legitimacy. Now, Bolingbroke was a direct descendant of Edward III, so it wasn't that terrible, but he had deposed the rightful king. Therefore, it was something that hung over him. And almost by way of divine punishment, he had various skin diseases as well. So he was literally plagued by everything until he died in 1413.
Did he have psoriasis?
It is likely it was psoriasis as opposed to leprosy.
My man.
Your man, Henry IV.
My man, Henry IV. Me and Henry, we're like thick as thieves. We just don't have very thick skin.
No, flaky as thieves.
Yeah.
Never have shepherd's pie around Nathan's house. That's all I'm saying. That's not much on the top, don't eat it.
So he was succeeded by his own son, Henry V, who, like the Black Prince, again, was a very impressive general, more domestically at the time of his father, whilst putting down the various uprisings. But after spending the first couple of years of his reign calming down the domestic tensions, and again, there wasn't a House of York just yet as such, it was more just general disquiet. Part of what he did actually was reinter Richard II, just to say, look, my dad fucked up, I'm making it right. here we are. Let's bury him in the very ornate tomb that Richard II had already had built for himself whilst he was still king, where he's buried next to his wife. And then after the first couple of years, he famously made war with France in 1415, had a crushing victory with the Battle of Agincourt, and basically spent the remainder of his reign for the next 6-7 years just destroying as many French armies as he possibly could. So, like his great uncle, the Black Prince, doing all of this fighting in France led to death from dysentery, aged 35. There's a bit of, symbolism or reflective outcomes as to how the royal family are working over the course of the 15th century. So, to the extent that if you think 10 years old is a bit young to inherit the throne, how about 8 months old?
Yeah, that's that's a bit too far.
Yes.
Very, very stoic. Won't give you a direct answer.
Just vomits and shits themselves every now and again.
Well, what is that? A Habsburg?
I appreciated that one. The Habsburgs, who were the equivalent over in Europe at this time, I should say. But
That was lost on me, that one.
That should be an Ian episode. They
it,
are.
it will be. Not immediately now. I think the next time I host something, it's going to have to be something slightly less dry. Yeah, so Henry VI, Henry VI was 8 months old upon becoming king. His mum remarried a man called Owen Tudor, and therefore had half-brothers called Jasper and Edmund, those wacky Welsh. And Edmund Tudor had a son called Henry. Put a pin in that one. He comes of age in 1437, but in the 16 years of protectorship, basically everything that his dad had won in France was eroding away. Certainly by one Joan of Arc. She was very much coming to prominence in this time. Met with, not the best of ends, but that as may be. If you're going to put yourself up to the parapet. And the result of lots of war debts were also coming to a head. And so not only was he, England's power greatly diminishing, which wasn't necessarily his own fault because, again, he was a child, but he also married Margaret of Anjou. When he was 23 and she was 15. Again, medieval royalty.
Things don't change, do they?
And the fact was, I only bring up the marriage on the basis that the dowry for the wedding wasn't financial, but so that he would give away the French province of Maine, which was a big PR mistake. He started becoming mentally ill in 1449, but after the 100 Years' War ended in 1453 with a crushing French victory, so it was definitively France who won the 100 Years' War, Henry just went into a catatonic state. And therefore, there was a big constitutional crisis with various men butting for power as to what to do about it. And this is really where the origins of the Wars of the Roses really begin, because we have, on one hand, the Duke of Somerset, who was the son of Bolingbroke's older half-brother. And then you also had Richard of York, who was famously of Rainbow mnemonic frame. Richard of York gave battle in vain. Not Richard III. It was this Richard of York who was Richard III's dad. Because Richard of York, whilst very instrumental in starting the Wars of the Roses, was never actually king. So there'd been a big power battle between York and Somerset. Somerset being a favourite of Henry's, York not being that. But because Somerset was so invested in France that when France completely fell to the French, Somerset was public enemy number one. York felt that he could take advantage of this and seized on like popular sentiment against the monarchy by, you know, raising forces, going to London and demanding better parliament and government. And it turns out that whilst he had enough support to draw armies, he didn't have a lot of political support. So it didn't ultimately get him anywhere until Henry VI went mad. And when Henry VI went mad, he was people reluctantly invited him into the Great Council to kind of act as a kind of interim government whilst the king was indisposed. Somerset was against this, and he was absolutely right to be against this because York immediately had him imprisoned in the Tower of London. Now, Richard...
Sorry,
go on.
Ian, is there ever... Has anyone ever tried to diagnose Henry VI with what was what was wrong with it?
What was causative of his mental illness?
Or has anyone made a stab at what it actually was that his mental illness? Like,
he was always meant to have been of a very weak disposition. I don't know, and frankly, haven't done that much research into what it might have been diagnosed as being. But because there was the great shock of having lost the 100 Years' War, it just kind of added something to his already somewhat fragile mental state. I would say that there's no shortage of examples of madness running through the royal family right up to this very day, but I couldn't give you an actual diagnosis.
Yeah, no, fair enough. It's just because there's that conception, do you know, where going to Victorian times, you know, where you'd have like usually rich women who would take to bed. I would take to bed, or like you know, was it a genuinely catatonic, non-responsive state, or was it he was just
I understand it.
for you?
Yes, it was. It was something that was serious enough that they would actually invite Richard into the fold.
Okay, so this guy was like, have you ever seen The Grudge, where that old woman at the beginning of The Grudge, where she can't like fucking speak or do anything for herself, and just all she can move is her eyes and shit.
Right.
I don't know if anyone's seen that. I don't
No.
know. Has anyone seen The
Is
Grudge?
this
Yes, yeah.
the J horror film
Yeah.
with the hair?
Like the original.
Yeah.
He wasn't kind of giving diktats from his bed or anything like that. He was properly out of action.
See
Right.
that?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I was thinking the same thing because I was thinking, I wonder if maybe back then that they kind of thought anything was a sign for mental illness. Like maybe he just, I don't know, started to just start being a bit kinder to peasants, and they were thinking, this guy's off his fucking trolley. Get rid of him.
Hey guys, maybe we shouldn't beat people to death because they missed a crop.
Get
Oh
rid.
my god, are you feeling okay? No. From what I understand, I actually think peasants might have been treated a bit better than workers in general today. But that's by the by. So just to summarize this then, so Henry VI went absolutely fucking doolally tap. He went catatonic, couldn't,
Yeah.
as I sensitively handle this. And then Richard, Duke of York, was invited into the councils. The Duke of Somerset did not like this because he was like, that cunt's up to something. He went, no, I'm not. And then immediately had the Duke of Somerset arrested. Is that right?
You know, I'm not even sure he said, no, I'm not. I'm just like, boom, arrested. Now, so Richard was appointed the protector of the realm after this happened, but after about 7-8 months, Henry's catatonia kind of subsided, and therefore the protectorship was given up in favour of the king, and Henry very promptly undid everything Richard had put in place and swung the balance of power back in favour of Somerset. So York wasn't having this, and therefore he and his brother-in-law Richie Neville who you might remember as being the member of Five who dated Billie Piper.
Ah, yes.
They kind of got together some armies, and there was going to be a great council meeting in Leicester, but they got their forces together more quickly, marched past Leicester, and met the king and Somerset with a more hastily assembled force of about 2,000 people at St Albans. And this is where, for it was none other than Somerset as the man who holed himself up in a pub to try and stop himself being arrested and killed.
Is that pub still there, and do we know which pub it is?
Now, we do know which pub it is. Whether or not it is still there is a different matter.
It's a Weatherspoons now.
It's just the reason I'm asking is that we seem to have like a lot of very historic pubs famous for a lot of like stuff. So it's just like, for example, in Durham. Well, we all live in the northeast. There is a village near me called the Cross Keys, and
Nice.
that's been there since like the 1100s, and in the 1300s, one of the Edwards stayed there, and one of the kings stayed there.
Mm.
I think it was like Edward. I don't know which Edward it was, but he stayed like there. So like, it's just, I don't know if like we'll have international listeners, and like, you know, Americans tend to listen to this type of stuff as well. It's just, it's quite, we have a lot of quite historic pubs, don't we? And
Yeah.
it's really interesting. But yeah, what pub is it?
So it was. So if it is still there, then wonderful. But you're going for the Castle Inn, which is not necessarily a unique pub name, but it is in St Albans. So I've never been to St Albans, but the next time I do, I'll look out for it.
I've not been to St Albans, but I did go to St Ives, and I met a bigamist once.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Get that one. Get that one.
There we go.
That's a Die Hard
Oh.
reference.
Yeah, that is where I know it from. Terrible.
So the first battle of St Albans in May 1455. This is the one where only 160 men out of up to 9,000 people who were in attendance actually died. York's demand was, look, just give us Somerset. Henry deliberated and then ordered a surprise attack to see if that would work. It didn't. And despite the fact that obviously there was a skirmish, it didn't actually amass into mass bloodshed, because at that point in time, especially with the aim not being to usurp the king, a lot of the forces under Neville and York's command were unwilling to necessarily fight against the king himself. Therefore, it was a relatively minor skirmish, but it was the first kind of sounding board of the Wars of the Roses. York's main enemy had been killed off, and it was replaced by the aforementioned young queen of Henry VI, who now had the biggest sway over her husband, and ultimately there was a kind of uneasy peace. There was a brief period of protectorship that again York took up between 1455, because the previous protector had been, in terms of running the government, had been Somerset. So the king was ill again until February 1456, but this time, rather than kind of shunt him away, Henry recognised that York is going to have to play some form of role in the government. Therefore, there was an uneasy peace, to put it mildly, between 1456 and 1459. However, this ultimately didn't last, and there was dynastic squabbles through to the Great Council that met in Coventry, in which York and the Nevilles refused to appear on the basis that there had been people summoned to arrest them the month before, and ultimately they took this as the fact that because they wouldn't be attending, they could be accused of treason. So the best way of beating the rap of treason is to raise a massive army and to start the Battle of Blore Heath in September 1459. And then this moved on to the Battle of Ludford Bridge, with York facing Henry again. And this one didn't work out quite as well for York, because the Earl of Warwick, who was known as the Kingmaker of the Wars of the Roses, York fled to Ireland. His wife and their two younger sons, George and Richard, the latter being Richard, the later Richard III, were imprisoned in Coventry. But because York had fled and run away to fight again another day, he was still able to launch other campaigns. And in doing so, he took London in 1460, became again Lord Protector of England because he'd been able to get around the fighting, and the king was effectively in custody. Now, it didn't play out, as well as it could have done for him, on the basis that there was a battle of Wakefield on the 30th of December 1460, in which
Oh, I've
York...
been there. I've
Yeah,
been to Wakefield. I've
Well, I
been
was
to
gonna-
Wakey Wines. Genuinely, I bought some Buckfast in Wakey Wines.
You're the guy, are you?
well,
I am the guy.
the Battle of Wakefield happens every Saturday night.
It does, yeah. I've been there on a stag do before. That was it's an intense little place.
Yeah, I've never been out in Wakefield. I've got the train
It's quite
through
good,
it.
actually.
Yeah. Is it full of the Cribs just playing all the time?
It is complete scum. Are the Cribs from Wakefield?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought they were from like Barnsley or something.
No, they're from Wakefield.
Bro, I like the Cribs, but no, they're not playing there. It is mostly dingy pubs with karaoke on every night. Lots of people arguing and fighting and Buckfast. It's great.
Were you one of the people who went to Wakey Wines for bottles of Prime?
No, I went to Wakey Wines before all that happened, and
Okay.
I remember me and my friend, we bought the Buckfast, and we came out and went back to the hotel that everyone was staying at, and we said, "You've got to come to this off license. It's the fucking weirdest place ever." The guy there is so eccentric. And then a few years later, when all that started coming out, I was like, "What the fuck? Like, I've been there. That's insane." So it lives up to the hype.
So I lived in Leeds for 6 years, and I was like in and around Wakefield. But I'd never heard of Wakey Wines. I'm gonna have to go and like research this afterwards.
It's just an off license with a really weird man and like people in there. It's just strange.
He went viral with the Prime energy drink craze,
Yeah.
where he'd basically... It's kind of like your Pokemon card nonsense, where it's just a case of really inflating the value of bottles of energy drink.
Oh,
Fucking
I recognise
excuse
this.
me, nonsense.
You heard me.
I recognise
It's
this
not.
fucking
It's
idiot.
right.
Oh my god, yeah. As soon as I saw his face, I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Or oh yeah, I recognise this guy. I think I did see a video about this actually. Is he the one where he just had like tons and tons of the product, and it was just like, what the fuck? Why is this there?
Basically.
Yeah, he just made really weird adverts to do with it. I really didn't think that the Wars of the Roses would then go into talking about Prime energy drink.
Someone called Logan Paul, the Edward V of the Wars of the Roses.
Yeah,
I mean-
they do. I've heard that.
Yeah, I mean, if you do want to go a little bit further, so we talk about Prime energy drink, and as always, with the Plantagenet line, for example, we can't forget that both sides of this war is the same fucking family. So it's just tale that is old as time. So you've got the Paul brothers now. Then we had the your House of York and House of Lancaster. It's just certain powerful families, and everybody else the world has to suffer for their stupid bullshit, whether it's Prime or Wars of the Roses.
Yeah.
There we go. I try to bring it back together.
The more things change, the more they stay the same. So, yes, Richard of York was killed in the Battle of Wakefield. So, again, despite the fact that he had a major part in taking down Henry VI, Henry VI wasn't actually, because obviously it's not as though the Battle of Wakefield was a major victory at the House of York with regard to that. What was the Battle of Towton, which happened 3 months later in March 1461. Again, Towton's not a place I've been to. It's somewhere in North Yorkshire. But it was the decisive battle of the Wars of the Roses. And as a result of how many Lancastrian forces were killed, it caused Henry VI to flee into exile in Scotland. And
Better than France.
well, less chance of dysentery, I suppose.
Yeah, apparently so.
So this caused Richard of York's eldest son, Edward, to take over the perceived right of succession that Richard of York had bestowed upon himself, and was crowned Edward IV. Now, as we say, Henry was very much still alive, but because all of the main Lancastrian power players had been disposed of, and as I say, I did part of my dissertation on this because I'm cool. I talked about the change in the nobility power structure in Leicestershire following the Battle of Towton. And the reason I did that is because I lived near the records office and it would be a fairly easy thing to research. And
Always thinking.
unique as well. It's like,
Mm.
which square's going to do that? Not the long-haired kazoo playing Jesse from Student Radio. That's the one.
Yeah.
Fucking Jesse. I know it's a history episode, but Jesus, you're pulling that one out, aren't you?
Bringing out the old slurs.
Again, go back to the mid-90s. So the House of York took over the English throne, and I'm going to skip over the majority of Edward IV's reign. Ostensibly, he was in post for a good 10 years before all of a sudden, there was only so long that sentiment against the House of York could not ferment, especially with Henry still being alive, and therefore there were further, eventually, a Lancastrian uprising in 1470. Following 1470 Lincolnshire rebellion that was sponsored by the aforementioned kingmaker, the Earl of Warwick. And whilst the rebellion didn't have its desired effect, it did quell upon popular sentiment against Edward, and it led to Henry coming back onto English soil. Warwick and the then Duke of Clarence helped him with the invasion, and it caused Edward and his younger brother Richard, again later Richard III, who'd become his kind of main general, to flee to Flanders. They fleedily in October
It's
1471.
stupid, sexy Flanders.
I keep thinking, I love Irish rebel songs, so I keep thinking of Bring Out Your Black and Tans.
Right.
Show your wife how you won medals down in Flanders. Probably, as an Englishman, probably not the best music to find, like ridiculously catchy. But fuck me, that's how you get me on side, is a catchy tune. Did they try that during the War of the Roses? Did they have a battle of the bands when they were recruiting people?
Yeah, the Shags won.
No, not the Shags.
More on that next episode.
I mean, I'm sure you've got to get people on side somehow. So more kind of like medieval enrollment tents with jesters playing whatever the kazoo equivalent of the day would be.
Freebird.
Mate,
Freebird.
a guitar solo almost as long as the actual war's going on.
I think it would sound great on a lute.
I have
Yeah, it
heard
would.
Freebird on a lute, and it is really good. I've also heard it on a
Excellent.
bagpipe. I've heard Freebird on most instruments, I think, and it sounds great on all of them.
You know
Well,
what?
I have tried to convince Mr. Wilson to do Freebird on his kazoo.
Yeah.
He's have a
I-
fucking asthma attack and die.
To which I responded, well, as long as you bring the oxygen tank for me afterwards.
His throat would be that swollen by the end of it. He'd be whistling without the kazoo.
Yeah.
Yes, so Henry VI regains the crown in 1471, the first king in the early modern era to have done so. It's like you might be able to find the example of a king in the Dark Ages who's managed to do that, but the first of only two to have done that. The other one being Edward IV, who took it back later that year in 1471.
Wow. It's like WWE, isn't it?
It's just hot-shotting the title. Really?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
He cashed in his money in the bank and he got it back just when he was down and out.
That's right. It's the shield holding the belt all on the same night. That's right. Lord Snooty here knows wrestling.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yes, so not only did through the Battle of Tewkesbury on the 4th of May 1471 see Henry VI defeated, this was definitely it for Henry. Edward IV entered London. Henry VI died that night, and with less of the perhaps reluctance that Henry IV had about the fate of Richard II. It's like, nope, defo dead. His own words.
Yeah.
The medieval. And
rip in peace.
So from there, from 1471 through to his death in 1483, the Wars of the Roses basically subsided because the rest of Edward's reign was peaceful. A brief skirmish with France, but hey, it was the time. But yeah, so Edward IV managed to see out his reign and just die through ill health, which is better than can be said of his predecessor. Now, what happens after Edward IV comes along is probably a bit more famous, because when I think people think of the Wars of the Roses, they do very much think about the end bit, which is very much Richard III versus Henry Tudor. So Richard III was not next directly in line of succession. Edward had two sons, another Edward and another Richard. So his successor was technically Edward V.
And this is, of course, made famous by the documentary Goosebumps, where there is a two-part episode, I believe,
Right.
about these two lads, because one of them is a Canadian boy. I think it's Goosebumps. It's normally a Canadian boy. Goes back in time, and he doesn't know who he is. And there's ghosts in the tower, from what I recall, and it is these two boys. So there is a Goosebumps episode based on this.
Yeah. So
Wow.
have you heard of the Princes in the Tower, Nathan?
Is that anything to do with Prince Andrew? Does he have them in the tower? Are they allowed out? No, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about.
That's fine. So Edward V and his younger brother Richard are the eponymous princes in the tower, because Richard III was expected to be ostensibly the protector for the younger Edward, as he would have been 2 seconds 12 at the time.
Oh.
So again, as is precedent, you'd have someone put in charge. Now, Richard III decided, probably not, and said for the protection of the country, he would be the regent, and had the princes put in the Tower of London for their own safety. And then trumped up reasons why his nephews were illegitimate. I believe he suggested. Now, the problem here is I might be getting some of my actual history confused with the Shakespearean, not exactly hagiography of Richard, but he'd ostensibly accused the two princes of being bastards, what with his sister-in-law having committed incest, and therefore had reason to believe that they weren't actually the legitimate heirs. Or
Wow,
there was
so they
some.
were sent to the wall. They were sent to the wall to fight the wildlings and the White Walkers.
It's so weird, right? That like this happens here, where Richard III accuses has the boys declared illegitimate by accusing incest and what have you, right? Then Henry VIII accuses the same thing with Anne Boleyn, right?
Yeah.
He accuses her of incest as well. Not only is this weird that it's happening by like it's like such a like it's a powerful royal tool, but the fucking cheek of the Plantagenet line to accuse anybody of, in fact, any aristocracy to accuse people of incest is the fucking cheek of that.
Yes.
Of all, like, those who live in glass houses
It'd
should
be
be
like
throwing.
Donald Trump calling somebody a paedophile.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, too much fake tan. Too much. Like, it's just like, you wind your neck in, although you can't because your spine's twisted.
I think,
Fucking hell.
I think, in fairness, I think the incest angle is more of a Shakespearean aspect. I think in history, it was more that the marriage was invalid. Therefore, Edward and Richard were illegitimate rather than necessarily the products of incest. That being said, he used that as the pretense to take the throne for himself in 1483, and the boys soon quickly disappeared. So, again, we've kind of seen this story before.
Does that happen with incest? You just disintegrate.
It's like it's Back to the Future rules. You
Oh.
just kind of fade out of existence.
Oh god!
It's once your father uncle stops blasting your mother auntie.
Yeah.
Once that seed dries up for the last time, you just kind of fade out of existence, and it's like a Thanos snap.
Yeah, it was like that Canadian boy from Goosebumps accidentally shagged his mum or something, and then those two princes disappeared.
Well, in the Goosebumps, story, it's a girl and her brother, but they change it to the prince and princess of it. But sorry, not to jump too far ahead, Ian. Just to check before you move on, did you have a note about what happened to these boys or the speculated discovery of them?
I wasn't going to go into it specifically, only that it's like one of history's biggest kind of unsolved mystery. It's almost certain that Richard III had them killed, but
Yeah.
there is no way of knowing when or how, which has led to, it's like one of the earliest kind of conspiracy theories.
Yeah, and
Really?
I just had a note that in 1674 there was work going on in the Tower of London, and workmen found a wooden box with two small skeletons inside it, just like stuffed under a staircase somewhere. And it's never been proven that it was the boys, but King Charles II had the bones buried in Westminster Abbey, and they're still there to this day, which is my
That is one thing I've heard.
Were they
Yeah.
okay? Were the boys okay after that?
So,
Sorry, carry on.
yeah, so
never
So-
play hide and seek unattended.
No, yeah, both of them hiding in the same place. Who's gonna find us?
So, Richard lost a lot of popularity over that because, again, he'd been a very trusted general under Edward, but this was seen as a naked power grab, and ostensibly his popularity didn't grow any better. His wife died. It was thought, and again, I don't know how much of this is through popular belief at the time and how much Shakespeare's blown up, but the idea that his wife died through poison and that he was having he was looking up his niece Elizabeth of York, which was the Princess of the Tower's sister, and therefore his niece, as his next potential wife. Because there was still Lancastrian sentiment out there, and there was still a rule of succession through one Henry Tudor, who was in exile in France at the time, there were enough forces around to urge him to make a move and to invade, so that he did in 1485. And this leads to the famous Battle of Bosworth, in which it was the final kind of Lancastrian versus Yorkist showdown. There was a third party in the armies of Lord Stanley, and again, because he knew how to read the popular mood, Richard III had Stanley's son in his custody to make sure that Stanley did the right thing. But when they met in Bosworth, which is a field on the western border of Leicestershire with the West Midlands, the worst kind of Midlands, just listen to the accents, the Lancastrian and Yorkist forces had a fairly even split, with the Stanleys just kind of staying out of the way. And then ultimately, the Stanleys turned the tide of the battle against the Yorkist forces, which meant that Richard, for all his faults, he was still a fighting general and king, so he went down in battle. Probably didn't say, "My horse a kingdom for a horse." Probably said, "Ouch, that really hurts," and proceeded to die. Henry VII was seen, Tudor was seen as Henry VII from that day forward. It was him who married Princess Elizabeth in a symbolic gesture to tie the houses of Lancaster and York together, which meant that any heirs going on from there would be all again technically Plantagenets, although by this point all heirs going from there, certainly within Henry's direct family line, were known as the Tudors, which is pretty much everyone's experience of school if you're someone our age, certainly in primary
Yes, that's
school.
all I learned about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you the story to take from this is that if you experience any hardship in your life, try shagging a relative.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
in fairness to Henry, that was less of a close relative than it would have been if his future wife had actually married her uncle.
Shame. Shame. Think
Now,
of all the fucked up offspring we could have had.
well, quite, because Henry VIII was so normal.
Yeah,
Um,
true.
Now, there is actually one final twist to this. The Wars of the Roses didn't actually finish with the Battle of Bosworth. It finished with the Battle of Stoke Field in June 1487. The remnants of the House of York, who did not accept the new order, found a 10-year-old who could be seen to have a passing resemblance to Edward V. Therefore, he was presented to some of the last kind of nobles who were sympathetic to the House of York. So there was the Deputy of Ireland, and he was taken over there. The child in question was a boy called Lambert Simnel, who was just simply a 10-year-old schoolboy. But come January 1487, he was crowned in Ireland as Edward VI. Obviously not officially, but he was brought over to England, and there was one last battle between the king's forces and those loyal to the House of York. The people responsible for putting up this pretender were killed in battle. Lambert Simnel himself was not actually killed or anything. Henry recognised that he was just put up as a figurehead and was employed, you'll like this, Nathan, as a spit roaster. Should I say spit turner in the palace kitchens, and then grew up to be a falconer.
Nice.
Right.
That is an uncharacteristically happy ending.
It is.
Yeah, that is considering what happened to the princes.
Yeah, exactly.
That yeah,
Better to be a fake prince than an actual one.
Yeah,
See,
pretty much.
I know a tiny bit, just the tiniest little bit about the Battle of Stokefield, and this is also
Seriously?
through one of just through one of my special interests of Alton Towers,
Okay.
because one of the noble families, the Talbots, they backed the Tudors during some the conflicts that happened there, and they owned Alton Towers there. John Talbot, the second Earl of Shrewsbury, was the owner of Alton Towers at the
Right.
time. And obviously, it never had any roller coasters back then. It was
No.
just the castle grounds.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where my knowledge goes. I'm glad I could have
Oh.
an input of any way, shape, or form. So
See,
yeah.
well, weirdly enough as well, I know one thing is that battle really showed just how badly crossbows can fuck you up.
Okay.
And I think that, like, yeah, so Nathan has his bit of special interest in it. Mine is, I think I remember from that last battle is that I remember like researching weapons in like medieval Britain, and then that battle came up specifically because it was an example of like, yeah, they tried attacking and got absolutely fucked up by crossbows. It took them like 2 hours, and then it ended
Jeez.
because they just couldn't stand up to the onslaught of the humble crossbow.
Sure. Cool. Okay.
Wow.
Well, so that's basically the history of it. I mean, I've got sections about legacy and such like, but I don't want this to run too much longer. But we do have a hard out for this. So all I would say is that almost all of the kings that have been covered over the course of this have been covered by Shakespeare. Again, with a slant that was in favour of the House of Lancaster, just because his patrons were the House of Tudor. So specifically Elizabeth I, whose grandfather was Henry Tudor, and then again she was succeeded by James VI of Scotland, the first of England. And again, there's no point like thinking, yay, the House of York. And it was the initial plays that he did specifically around Henry VI and Richard III, which actually made Shakespeare a legit playwright. They were very
Oh.
early on in his career. It was only the things you think of as his bigger hits were all kind of mid to late career, but the stuff that he did on the what was called the Henriade series of plays that were what got him established. The one that is the most contested is almost inevitably Richard III. Richard III has a long time devotee fan base, even before we get into the whole digging him out of Leicester and everything. He was always one of these kings who were sort of like very badly treated by historical events. Therefore, there was a kind of counter movement to say, no, Richard III was much better. He's been sorely mislined. There's no proof that he killed the princes in the tower or poisoned his wife, etc., etc. To the extent that there used to be in one of the gates in the town walls in York, some wacky actor had hired out the space to create his own Richard III museum, which was based around his own one-man show of being Richard III on trial for the murder of the princes in the tower. And I have to assume it's no longer there. I mean, the last time I was in York, I think I checked. I couldn't see any sign of it, but it was definitely there when I was in York around 2009, 2010 time. So that was quite bizarre. And just quickly on the whole Leicester thing. Yes, he was dug up in a car park in Leicester in August 2012. It was always known that he was buried around that area. But it just so happened he was in the ground next door to my old school building. And that building has now been turned into a Richard III museum. So when I did visit the Richard III Visitor Centre, I found it fucking surreal. A place where I'd actually studied history aged 10 was now a legit history gallery. And like the old lunchroom was the museum cafe, etc.
You can't keep the royal family away from these kids, can you?
Hey.
Can't do it.
And
Oh my
also,
God.
they completely remodelled Leicester Cathedral for the reinterment. There was a a big ceremony where Benedict Cumberbatch, who's meant to be distantly related, did a reading. That's the second Cumberbatch mention in this episode.
Yes, he's got multiple links to the War of the Roses.
And there was a film about the discovery of the remnants from the other year called The Lost King, which was spearheaded by Steve Coogan. And Steve Coogan was sued for defamation for making the University of Leicester the villains of the piece, because they were more of the kind of orthodoxy against the amateur archaeologists saying, "Oh, just dig here," who was the hero in Coogan's eyes. Steve Coogan there.
Bloody hell.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So thank you so much, Ian. There's a couple of things that I just want to very quickly rattle off. Can I do a little bit of philology? It'll
Please.
take me a little bit. So the name Tudor, I had a look in preparation for this episode because Henry Tudor is like, you see him as like the culmination of it. Side note, I would have loved to have seen that first Christmas after that marriage that unites the houses. That would have been a fucking tense affair, wouldn't it? So the name.
Wakefield.
Oh, we've had some fun times here over the years.
So Tudor as a surname is of Welsh origin, as we know, which comes from the Brythonic, the British Celtic language, Tudur, and is related to the name Theodore and to the name Theodoric. Now, Theodore comes from ancient Greek, Theodoros, meaning gift of God. And Theodoric is a Germanic name, and English is a Germanic language, is a Gothic name, means people ruler. So the Tudor, in both of its origins, as a given name, because it was a given name as well as a surname, means the people of like high authority, which I found very interesting. And the clan of the Tudors, the historic Tudors, came from Anglesey in Wales, I think.
All right. Yeah.
So I just wanted, I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to have like one word that I'm going to research, and it was Tudor. But Ian, two very quick questions for you. Make the answers as quick as you can. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Sure.
One, is War of the Roses inspiration for Game of Thrones? Gotta be right.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Like, it's
gotta
gotta
be
be.
right.
Yeah.
I'm rewatching it now, and even just listening to all this, there was so many puzzle pieces going into place with all the incest and the lying about bastards and just everything that is going on from the different houses who are so close yet so far.
Yeah, it is really fucked up. Like, that's something we should probably look into. Second one, Ian, why the roses? Why the different colours?
So the rose was a symbol for both houses. The red rose was Lancastrian, the white rose was Yorkist, and therefore when Henry Tudor and Elizabeth of York got married, the Tudor rose was a combination of the two.
So where did it originate? Was it just a happy accident that these two started fighting and they both had roses?
Delightful accident.
Seriously? Oh, okay.
No, I think a lot of houses, if you go through like heraldry and such, like a family will have its own kind of family flower, family animal, family, all such of weird noble shit. And also the fact that the House of York and the House of Lancaster were bestowed at roughly the same time, it might have just have been the idea of going for a similar thing. Now, I don't know if like the Rose of Clarence would have been yellow, but that line kind of died off pretty
So
quickly.
it would have been like something popular from the Plantagenet line or some kind of predecessor where it was like, oh, okay, well, we're going to split, but we've still got a bit of a shared identity almost.
That would be best guess, yeah.
Oh, fair enough. Something to consider. All right then. So I'll ask. It's a bit unusual, but as Ian's the host, but we'll ask the question: do we curse Ian for bringing this knowledge to us, or do we thank him? I'm going to curse you with it.
Sure.
I'm going to curse you for making me live with this knowledge because it's very fascinating, and now I'm going to have to go off and do more research on this because it is fascinating. But I'm going to look at like the Shakespearean angle for it of the salacious rumors and all
Yeah.
that shit. So I'm going to curse you, you bastard. But thank you at the same time,
Right.
Nathan.
I'm I'm going to thank you because during this stretch of you talking about this, I've managed to open all my gifts on Pokemon Go. I've won a game of League of Legends Teamfight Tactics, so it's all going well. So thank you.
Oh shit! It crossed my mind to play TFT, but I was like, no, just stay good, Chris. Stay good.
I'm glad I had your full
It's
attention.
just so easy to do and not think anything while you're doing it. So,
But no, so to our wonderful listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I thank Ian so much for this. It's been what's really been difficult for me is telling my wife about this, and she was like, "Ian's definitely my favorite. Yeah, I can't wait for this episode."
Really?
And then
what the fuck?
I know, right? And then I was
There's only
telling.
3 of us, and
I know.
she's married to you. That puts me in last.
Well, it makes it worse for me because I am married to her. And I told one of my friends as well. I was like, "Oh, we're recording about War of the Roses tonight," and they were like, "Great, tell Ian he's already my favorite of the 3 of you." And I was just like, "What the fuck?" So, Ian, you've obviously captured the imaginations of a few people I've already spoke to about to this episode.
But then they have to sit down and
Wow.
actually listen to the damn thing.
Well, I learned a shitload, so fuck them. If that's on them, yeah. But you never know what people are doing while they're listening to this. I
True.
imagine some people will be smashing one out, like just regardless. So don't.
Actually,
worry too much
I'm
about
glad Nathan was doing other things rather than smashing one out.
it.
Well, if any of those 2 people are listening right now, go fuck yourselves.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us, listeners. And look out for our next episode, which should be releasing in a week your time, where we are going to we're going to cover a very interesting band from the 60s with Nathan's first
Woohoo!
episode, but let's save that for then. So I will finish it off by saying thank you once again to our host for today, Ian, and I will say goodbye from me, Chris.
From me, Ian.
And from me, Ian.
Bye.
Bye.